Hey everybody. Okay, here are the notes from Monday, the 25th, where we talk about transpiration pull. There's a few things that we got to know. So let's just start with the tree. This is a tree, right? You got the leaves up here. Here's the trunk. Here's the roots. Okay. So we already know, we covered when we looked at the carrot and the floppy carrot, that water wants to go into the roots because of osmosis. Okay. So osmosis is when water goes into the roots because the roots are hypertonic and the soil is hypotonic. And water always goes from hypo to hypertonic. So water is going into the roots, and that generates root pressure. Root pressure Root pressure is when there is now a lot of water in the roots, and so the water wants to go somewhere. Just like we have veins in our arm where blood goes through, the tree has veins that water goes through. The water is going to go into the xylem, and the xylem is a vein for the tree that carries water. So the root pressure pushes the water into the roots and goes up into the xylem. Now that there's water in the xylem, something called capillary action happens. We talked about capillary action on Friday when we put a tiny little tube in the water and we saw that the tube filled with water a little bit. Because of cohesion and adhesion, water wants to climb up the tube. So it goes up a little bit. Now, the smaller the tube is, the higher the water will go. And if you remember, the tube or the xylem, the vein of the tree, is so small that we had to look under a microscope to actually see it. So it's really small, so the water can actually travel up the xylem from the capillary action. All right, the last part of this is transpiration pull. So in the leaves, there are stoma or stomata, right? One stoma, many stomata. So the stomata are the mouths of the leaves, where the carbon dioxide goes in and the oxygen comes out. But oxygen is not the only thing that comes out. Water molecules also come out of the stoma. And when water molecules come out of the stoma, they are still cohesive. They still show cohesion. So those water molecules want to hold on to each other, just like we saw when we looked at the surface tension on the pennies. So the water molecules are holding on to each other. And as they're coming out of the leaf, out of the stoma, they're pulling on the water in the xylem. So you can see the xylem, just like the vein of the tree, brings the water all the way up. And while transpiration is happening, when water leaves the stoma, that's called transpiration. When water leaves the stoma, that's transpiration. So when the water leaves the stoma, it's pulling on the water behind it because it's cohesive. So if you think of the water as a really long chain, when you pull on the end of that chain, you're pulling the water up the tree and out of the leaf. So that's how we get water from the roots all the way up there. And that pulling on the chain is called transpiration pull. That's when water leaves the stoma, it pulls water up the tree. So the water is leaving the stoma, pulling the water up the rest of the way. And that's how water gets from the bottom of a tree, from the roots, all the way up to a tree, even if it's 500 feet tall, like the world's tallest tree. So we have those three important things we need to know. First, root pressure, which is caused by osmosis, when water goes into the roots and goes up into the xylem. Capillary action, when water enters the xylem, it helps go up the xylem. And third, transpiration pull, when water goes out of the stoma via transpiration, it pulls the water up and out of the plants. Transpiration pull. 1, 2, and 3. We need to know all of those things for how the water gets up and through the tree. If you have any questions, send me an email. Other than that, I'll see you guys in class.